you have to be quite brave to put your voice out there. Like, even if you've got, if you're a teenager with a social media account now, someone's going to find it and somebody might, post some abuse about something that you've posted, which is kind of terrifying when you think about the world we live in, where everyone has access to you.
Have a reason for doing your podcast. If it's just to have a conversation with somebody, that's just not going to get very far. And there's something like 95% of podcasts don't go beyond episode 4, and there's a reason for that, and that is because people get bored. There's a lot of effort put into it. They realise that people aren't listening, and actually, unless you'd planned it, people forget why they did it in the first place. They run out of things to talk about.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Talking Hospitality with me, Sarah Cattell.
And me, Phil Street. Can you believe that? And why is this episode so special, I hear you ask? Well, not many podcasts make it to 50 episodes, but this one has. It
started as a lockdown project for a giggle between two industry friends, but today we sit here in the company of the great and the good of hospitality podcasters, and from what Phil rightly describes, this is the greatest industry in the world.
You've done your research, I see.
Yeah, I've heard you.
So today we're going to tell you what it takes to start your own podcast with advice from our magnificent guests. So I suppose we should just get on and meet them.
Great stuff.
We have Michelle Righini, is that correct?
That is correct, yes, if I was in a court of law, but most people call me Shell.
Fantastic. And you are the founder and host of We Recover Loudly, a podcast that is shaking up conversations about addiction, recovery and drinking cultures in the hospitality industry. And Michelle is also the only person here today to have appeared on Talking Hospitality 3 times.
Surely enough. It's a bit embarrassing, isn't it?
I'm really worried about that. Well, thanks, Shell.
No, saying he's more embarrassed. Me saying yes to everything. You guys are
just trying to say.
I'm a bit starstruck, I'll be honest, so. But I'll try and keep it professional. Next up, we've got Michael Tingsager. Am I saying that right, Michael?
Yeah, that's very good. Very good. For my first try, that's like, I'm Danish originally, and even Danish people can't get that surname right. So you did really well.
Okay, I will consider myself fluent. Fantastic. Michael is the founder of and the host of Hospitality Mavericks, showcasing the real Mavericks of our industry who are doing good and inspiring things and impressing us all with their work.
Yeah, next up, we have Mark McCulloch, a.k.a. Mark McC, the Godfather, the Master of Disaster, and any other nickname you kind of care to mention. The founder and host of Supersonic Marketing, the one that kind of probably started it all, to be honest, and a podcast that is dedicated to helping you take your food brand supersonic. Mark, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me. Nice to see everyone.
Me too.
I'm going to go and change Clark's Wikipedia entry now as the founder of podcasts, just so we're all clear.
Just on that note, there was someone before, which was Propel, actually. So Propel did a little sort of podcast now and again. Sort of, podcasting started and everyone went, wow, and then it had a massive dip and everyone was sort of slagging it off. And then it kind of started again. It was just kind of in the dip. And everyone was thinking it was passé. So I need to say shout out to Propel and James Haken for doing that. I'm sure they did it first, so yeah, well done to them.
Okay, so you're the mini Godfather then. Okay.
Well, I'll take it. I'll take the, it's like who invented the phone, who invented the radio, and there's all these arguments. So obviously Scotland invents everything. So,
not calling him the Godfather. Why are we not calling him
the Godfather?
Come on, be better.
There we go. Do that.
Brilliant. Super gig. Okay, so next we've got Tracy Rashid. Tracy Cakey Rashid is on the panel of hosts for Talking Hospitality and is a cake artist sharing her wisdom of all things business and bakery. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Sarah. I was going to say thank you for having me, but I guess I had to be here, really.
The obligation was true. It's like if you go into work every day and someone goes, welcome back. It's like, I have to be here.
Well, I want to be here, obviously. Yes.
Yes, and then we got my old mate Kieron Bailey, an impassioned industry leader, trainer, and speaker, who is about to launch his own podcast called People on Purpose. Look out for that. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about that later. How are you, my friend?
Philip, I'm fabulous. I'm in the company of amazing people. Michelle looks fabulous. And me. Outfit. You look like you barely made the effort to this video, but everybody else, very, very
standard.
Lovely today.
Thanks for that, Kieron. I feel better now. And last but not least, Timothy R. Andrews, my dear friend and the host and co-founder of this here podcast, Talking Hospitality. Tim is an industry recruiter, fountain of knowledge, collector and knower of people, and a general all-round awesome guy. Hi, Tim.
Hello, thank you very much. I can't really follow that up much, but thank you everybody for joining us today, and fits to Phil and Sarah for doing the hosting. Will I be saying that at the end? We'll find out, won't we?
Well, a huge welcome to everyone, obviously, and welcome to the show. So let's get stuck in.
Excellent. So you want to start a podcast. There's a bit more to it than just chatting away into a mic, although you probably wouldn't think that if you just listened to my show. But the good news is we are going to demystify all of this for you with a guide to the podcasting nuts and bolts.
Now, actually, I'm going to learn something here as well, because when we started talking hospitality, I was just chatty Betty over here, while Tim is the hero and he made it all happen. He got all those recordings out there into the world. So, Tim, tell us about all those things that no one thinks about when they're making a podcast a reality.
Well, I think the first thing is I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I still don't really know what I'm doing, but it just seems to have landed. But I think the first thing to do is anybody who wants to do a podcast, a lot of people think it's easy. They think, we'll get a microphone and we'll riff and that'll be the end of it and everybody will listen. Well, I've got news for anybody that thinks that. Unless you're famous already, probably no one's going to listen at the beginning. That's really important for people to realise, because it is the most spontaneous podcasts that we listen to are actually not often the most prepared. They're often scripted, or they've got a baseline to follow, and there's a lot of hard work that goes beyond that. So the first thing is have a reason for doing your podcast. If it's just to have a conversation with somebody, that's just not going to get very far. And there's something like 95% of podcasts don't go beyond episode 4. And there's a reason for that. And that is because people get bored. There's a lot of effort put into it. They realize that people aren't listening. And actually, unless you planned it, people forget why they did it in the first place. They run out of things to talk about. So number one is know why you're doing it. Number 2, have fun doing it, because it can take over your life, particularly when you start doing if you're starting off and you're doing the editing yourself and you're doing the marketing yourself and you're doing the script, is a lot of hard work. And you need to put time in the diary. So, for example, when we first started, to be honest, we didn't edit, did we, Sarah, at the beginning? So anybody who listens to our first 2 episodes will know that. We didn't even have a name. And then we realised at episode 3, where we had a guest on, we had to call ourselves something. So
we didn't even introduce ourselves in the first one. No one knew who we were.
We didn't even say who we were. And so the prep is really important, so particularly if you've got guests on. You need to have an idea of why you're going to get them on. Otherwise, one or two things will happen. Well, a number of things can happen. You can have a guest that will just run away with the show and not really give you any content. You could have a guest that just doesn't answer anything, or just one-word answers. And if you haven't got prep, where do you take that? Pardon?
A Meg Ryan.
Yes, a Meg Ryan.
Arky interview where she just answered with yes or no.
Well,
it wasn't great TV.
Remain nameless, who actually had a panic attack after the first question, and then sort of ran off, didn't they? Sort of through the interview. Yeah, and that was kind of awkward. Had we not prepped, that would have been more awkward, I think. And I thought the third thing is, you've got to have fun doing it because it takes over. And the third thing is be prepared to put the effort in, because it is hard. Like I said, it's hard work. In terms of nuts and bolts, you've got to think about who your listeners are. I think the biggest challenge when I speak to people is when they're trying to set up a podcast is they think they can do a podcast for everyone. And you can't speak the language for everybody. You just can't. So you've got to choose your niche, choose who you want to speak to, because that dictates the language that you use in the podcast. And that's really important because that starts part of your character, the podcast, and and the guests that you have on, the things that you're trying to achieve with it. And it's really, really important to think about that. So for example, when we within hospitality, sort of been in the industry for at least 10, 15 years in a leadership role, who have got, middle-aged, British, perhaps some hotel backgrounds, but we have 25% of our audience is from the US. So we haven't excluded anybody from listening to it by having a niche, but we have a voice of who we're speaking to when we do this. And I think that's some advice that I would give to somebody as well.
I think, Tim, talking about platforms, so recording is easy, right? You can record into your computer, your iPhone. You've got an actual recording of what you've just said, what you've just recorded. But we're not doing that today. We're using a platform specifically. And that platform, I know, makes it easier to make that podcast available. And you just said about 25% of the listeners of Talking Hospitality are in the US. Has anyone else here experienced listeners from around the world where they didn't expect to pick up listeners?
I had a fella in Uganda check me out, which kind of blew me out of water a little bit, to be fair.
Ooh.
I just think we quite like the tide, to be fair. And there was a tone and voice that screamed out to him. Nobody else in Uganda picked him up, so he told his friend when nobody else paid attention. So I don't really speak for the good people if he found out. But that one fella, he kept coming back, so I'm all on board.
In the early days, it was a lot less competition, right? There was a lot fewer podcasts out there. So yeah, it was things like you were, number 3 in Belgium and, number 20 in the Scandinavia and things like that. That was all really cool. But I mean, it was based off of super low numbers at the time. It wasn't very mature. I mean, I'm talking 8-9 years ago, something like that. But yeah, I never really, I guess some of the information that you're getting through as well, could be due to VPNs and, all these kind of things as well. So it can maybe not be as clear as you think, where you go, oh my God, right, we're going to do a tour in the US because 25% and, it might be you and a couple of people and their dog because, it's some other reason. So yeah, I mean, it's usually fairly spread equally amongst, pockets of English speaking countries. And I mean, you don't tend to be big in France if you're, speaking English really seems to be, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think I totally agree with Mark. In the beginning, you're totally, excited about, because I started around the same week as Mark. And we didn't know, we met each other a week after, and then we both launched a podcast in a co-working space in Brighton. But I also remember on the business and entrepreneur list in countries like number 2 or 3, which would be totally impossible today to get up there. And then, the amount of hospitality podcasts there is today, I don't even have the number anymore, probably approaching hundreds. So yeah, but actually my first really, person that reached out was from Costa Rica. In the jungle of Costa Rica, there was this guy that's been listening to the show. He ended up getting on the show as well because he ran a little restaurant in the jungle. And he got some kind of advice from one of the conversations. I think it was Friska, the founder of Friska, Griff, said something and he implemented that. And he was so grateful for that little bit of advice. So that was I never thought I would touch somebody in Costa Rica running a restaurant in the jungle, So that was a quite cute experience.
You should never touch your guests, by the way. That just been just a handy, unless there's consent. So yeah, don't be gropey with the guests. I think it's a big headline for today.
Why do you think we're online, Mark?
Why sure. So what we're doing now is just starting to build a list of do's and don'ts. And rule 1, do not touch people unless they've consented into his signature. Seems fair. Good job, man.
I'm writing these down, Kieron, by the way. We'll publish this list of do's and don'ts. Start with that. But Tim, tell us about editing, because editing is something that sounds easy and really isn't.
I hate editing. I'm not going to lie. I don't have a very good attention span generally. But when we first started to record for an hour and then try and edit, for us, we wanted to have about a 20-minute program, right? So we started recording our interviews and then cutting it down. And it would take me 8 hours to edit one podcast, deleting every R, swear word, particularly in hospitality, because my mum listens, like I said, and it would take a long time. This is before AI came in as well. AI has changed a lot of that, to be fair. However, at the time, this is only 2020, so it's not that long ago, it would take ages, and then you sort of have to create a story, because conversations naturally flow and ebb, right? So they come in, but to keep, for listeners, you've got to have the story consistent. So if you jump too much, people can't keep track of you. So then you'd have to drag bits in and move it around. But the joy of it, what I will say is the joy of editing is the story creation from that. So I used to love the fact that we'd have a whole conversation, then we could turn it into a bit of a story and turn it into always. I found that at the end of that, a really great experience, because you go like, look, that's what I've created. Like, and sometimes you could put context to the conversation that wasn't there in the conversation just by editing. I mean, I think the one time that I decided I need to get someone else to do editing was we had Jill Whittaker on, and we straddled her episode, and it was over 2 years. It was 2 years recording, so we needed to combine them. And this is exclusive. And one of I can't remember which one of you two couldn't make the actual second episode. So then we then got you to do responses to it over the top of it, so it looked like you were there for the second episode. And then we merged it. And you wouldn't know that was 2 years difference. Because through the editing, I mean, it did take me 16 hours and a lot of caffeine and swear words, I think and I was,
There was quite a few WhatsApp messages that came through while he was.
I like to outsource it now. And then I outsourced it to Tracy so she can tell how much she enjoyed that. And then we ended up,
it was, so I saw how stressed Timothy would get sometimes. So I actually quite like editing. I do it for my own business. I thought, let me give it a try. As a whole, it's not so bad. But like Timothy said, it's the consistency. It's making sure you've got that structure, that story. It's also making sure you've got your gaps. If you're having any jingles or any adverts and things like that, and making sure it's the right time. We did have a guest on that there was so many ums, it was almost impossible to take them out of Tim's face. Like, he knows exactly what I'm talking about. It was quite difficult.
No, sorry about that again.
Phil sings.
Never mind.
And sometimes with multiple guests as well, because people talk over each other. So you want to get everything in, but sometimes it's no longer relevant by the time the first person's finished what they've said. So it's kind of like really having to go back and listen to make sure it actually makes sense and not how you remember the episode being recorded. So that was a tip that I definitely picked up while I was doing that.
I have a question for Shell from editing, because Shell, your podcast goes into some really kind of detailed conversations about people's personal lives and history. Kind of, how do you find the editing process? Kind of, are you cutting much out, or are you just thinking, right, this is given of themselves, I'm just letting it go?
I feel really lazy compared to you guys. I don't do any editing. I fly by the seat of my pants. That was the way I did it because of naivety. When I started the podcast, I didn't even consider that I might need like a script or questions, or maybe to have researched my guest. I was just grateful that people were willing to talk about some really difficult conversations. And so I kind of just was so excited to have people come on that I just didn't know anything else. And I connected before I started the podcast. I think I spoke to Mark, actually. I slid into his DMs. I was like, hi, I'm starting a podcast and I know you've got a podcast. Can you help me? And he was very gracious and told me lots of lovely advice, of which I ignored it all. And and just decided to just go with it. And I don't edit, because of the nature of my podcast being that it is very much about letting people just have that free flowing conversation. However, in my spare time now, I do podcast editing, as a job for other people. And, it is very challenging. And as been shared, I don't think people I didn't estimate how long it would take me to do a 25-minute episode. It's taking me literally like 8, 9, 10 hours. And the challenge as well with this one is that the guests recorded in the same room, and one of them talks really quickly over the other one. and one has an accent and the other doesn't. One's Australian, and like, so AI is wonderful if you speak eloquently like this. But if you don't, you're buggers. So yeah, no, editing luckily is something I don't really have to do for my own podcast. However, in terms of just what Tim said, to keep a track of stories and stuff like that, what I do is while I'm interviewing, and a couple of you guys have been on my podcast, as I make notes, and I write reams of notes as I'm chatting to people. So like, for example, if Kieron's or Mark's revealed, so I haven't had Kieron yet, he's going to be on next season, reveals something really, really juicy and I want to go back to it, I'll make myself a little note so that when that flowing conversation allows for, I'll be like, Kieron, let's just go back to your childhood a second. You mentioned that.
Kieron's a perpetual oversharer, so the perpetual notes. And
I look forward to that one.
I know. So you've all got something to recover from.
Truth. I wanted to ask you all a bit about kit, right? So, for example, I'm sat here today, I'm talking straight into my laptop. You know, laptops have come a long way, microphones and videos have come a long way. You know, we are post Zoom from lockdown now. So these things are all there at our disposal. But there's a few people here who've got headphones on. There's a few people talking into a mic. I have a mic as well. You can get, I think, a bit lost in very expensive kit online, which people will convince you need. But the truth is, if you're just starting out, what can you get away with?
I think you can start off with a 50 quid USB thing from Amazon to start with. I think if you try and, or less, Phil's pointing or less.
No, that, pointing at the actual microphone that is a USB.
Oh, was it?
Number from Amazon, yeah. Indeed. And so I have had this microphone since I started the podcast, and I've learned that you can't use this in every environment, but when you're in a controlled environment like I am now, it absolutely is fine. It does, you know, it maybe is 25% less quality than perhaps something that you might pay a few £100 for. But if you're starting out, you absolutely don't need to worry about that kind of stuff. This is absolutely good enough in this environment.
I would say as well, Facebook Marketplace is your friend with that particular platform. Like, you can go out there and you can get lots of good quality stuff, equipment that other people have bought, because most people podcasts don't go past 4 episodes, but lots of people do buy lots of kit to start it, and then sell it.
That's such dark advice, Kieron, that it's so relevant. Lots of people fail, so get their stuff.
Well, I think it's not just failing as well. I think just podcasters that are then getting really into it, it's like cars or guitars or what, you know, you'll just keep going, oh, I'm just going to upgrade again. And actually, if you can find someone that's on that, they'll have taken care of the stuff before and all the rest of it. Also, look out for days like Amazon Prime days and things like that, where, you know, you'll get a good reduction. I was going to say a different thing, and I know it's, what can you get away with? This is why I've got no money. There's a great phrase, which is buy cheap, buy twice. And I think sometimes, you know, if you think, actually, I'm going to be into this, if you buy some good kit, and let's say you buy 300 quid's worth of stuff, let's say you've splashed out, let's say, actually, you'll get to play with it, and you'll get to sell it on for 250. So actually, you've sort of rented it for 50 quid for your time. Do you know what I mean? So actually, the good stuff will keep its value. I mean, I've got my eye on a £800 mic at the moment that is never going to happen short term. The one that Howard Stern uses that I'm absolutely obsessed with. And I did a podcast with Soho House, and they built a mini studio for me and Nick to do the podcast. And of course, they had 2 of these that we were using, and I just wanted to lick it. It was so delicious. It's a Neumann mic.
I think you about to say they had 2 and now they have 1.
No, I didn't get away with it. You get checked at the door. But I would say, maybe just go a bit above basement level, a little bit like the wine list, don't buy the house wine a little bit. So there's that. And then, of course, that's before you get into the world of what real podcasting is now, which is getting into Champions League stuff. And it's now a podcast, a TV show.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you've got, it doesn't have to be, but if you want the clips and the thing, it's cameras, it's editing that, it's mics, it's lights, it's, if you're going to the other end of things, but the competition, if you are wanting to, be podcast famous and really get out, that's kind of what it's taken now. But I think the fundamental thing is do it for you first. Do it as your hobby, do it as something that you want to do. And it's about getting your hours in. The first few podcasts will be awful. And that's okay, because you won't look back on them and eventually they'll drop off and whatever. It's just getting your hours in. And another tip would be try and maybe get into radio in some way. So, try and host a wee show at a local online station or hospital radio or something like that. If you can get those hours up of just being used to being behind the mic and fluffing up and all the rest of it, very quickly you'll get into this sort of muscle memory that you start to become a bit more one take, and then that cuts down on your editing and all the rest of it. But yeah, I would, as I say, if you really want to do it, I think you're not going to lose much money if you buy half decent kit. And I can send you a link to all the kit that I've got if people want to have a nosy, and see, because I forever get asked about that.
Yeah, me too.
I need new kit, Mark, so can I have that link, please?
You can have the link. I'm not buying you nothing for your Christmas, but yeah, I'll
No, because I did what you said. I bought cheap, and it's one of those that you kind of now think like, I wish I hadn't 18 months ago, because I have had to replace it, but more so it's been a headache. It's just that constant, like, is it going to work? Isn't it going to work? Oh my God, does it sound right? And especially when you've got guests, maybe from overseas or wherever, who are giving you their time, you don't want to waste
all
it.
Money.
And then
that's all money. That's the way that I think about it. That's if you try and put it into cash terms of what you cost an hour, all these things, and it's kind of like the Ryanair flight, taking the Ryanair flight so that you could save 50 quid to, actually you'd been better off, going in comfort and less stress. So, I think that's a big lesson that I've learned. Just, save up, go for it. And also credit cards and, all that, just, put it away somewhere and pay it off later.
I think as well, it's remembering that your voice is a piece of kit as well. So, draw on the experiences that you've had before. I know Mark was saying, if you can get onto like a hospital radio station and kind of practice and get through it that way. But if you've got a background in speaking or whatever it might be, draw on that. Be yourself. Don't think you have to kind of create this voice or this persona or something that's different to you, because people want you. That's the whole point of your podcast. So your voice is a really crucial piece of kit, and whatever you're buying will just amplify that. Was how I see it.
Yeah, that is great advice. And actually, Tracy, you haven't even seen my rough script, but this leads very we're psychic, it's fine. This leads very nicely into the next section that we're going to cover. So, you've got the platform, you found an editor, you've got whatever kit you've decided to get. But the next stage is, what on earth are you going to talk about? Okay. And this is where people do get stuck, I think. They want a podcast, but what are they going to talk about? Or they've got a seed of an idea, and how do you grow on that? So we're going to start you all really. How did you find your why for why you're making the podcast? And how did that lead to you finding your voice for the podcast?
I'll start with talking hospitality, because, then in response to the negativity that was going on in all the media, social media, everything like that, main media, although we love them now, the caterer, all of that was saying things like hospitality will never recover. And yet we were hearing people going out and doing some really positive things, even, supporting communities, making sure that people learn how to cook with even the basic stuff, selling Michelin star meals for £3. It was like an incredible time that we weren't hearing about. And so basically we did a podcast to talk about that stuff. I think in hindsight, for our own sanity. everything we knew and loved had been turned into chaos, and it was just one way of us saying, well, what else is going on out there? And that's why we did it, and we wanted to share that news with people. So like a little tiny drop of, goodness against a sea of depression, really.
And I was kind of pretty much exactly the same, except I suppose I predated COVID. I'd had this idea around the fact that exactly what you're saying is actually all of the stuff that gets out there into the mainstream media is just really centered around the crap side of the industry, which does exist, and we can't deny that it does in certain cases. But also my experience is that there's an awful lot of really good stuff too, and way more good stuff than bad stuff. And I definitely think that we, as an industry, we really, really suffer from this image that people perceive the industry just to be full of, problems and things like that. And every sector has the problems. So really, I just wanted to use my voice, and this is something that I really struggled with. I've always been, I suppose, I've suffered with imposter syndrome a lot through my life in terms of why does my voice matter? And it wasn't until I got into my 40s where I kind of basically what I'm saying is this is my midlife crisis. And the bottom line with that is that all of a sudden I started to put some emphasis in that my voice does have power, and actually my experience is pretty positive. So let's go and just talk to other people about their positive experiences to showcase the fact that actually what you might have heard out there is not wholly true. And here is why. And just do that through the stories of the people that already work here.
I mean, for my money, People on Purpose was quite selfish, if I'm really honest with you. So I had a bit of a mental breakdown this year and just totally lost my way and felt like I totally lost my purpose. And Michael very helpfully identified one block types, it's the same, or the tactics for short on. So this is one of the tactics or kind of what I do walk forward. So it's having interesting conversations with people about their purpose, where it born from, how their family, that kind of impact, influenced it, and how it kind of ties into their ambition, what that all looks like. So it's really helpful for me to have conversations, kind of like count, to breathe. Not being a Jesse's done do it today. So I just can converse the van country,
Their own sense of purpose and not used to that. It's a lot of fun.
And I think that's a really key point as well, is that I think there has to be an element of self-catharticism, if that's the word, because otherwise you will be one of the people who get to 4 episodes and that's the end of it. I think you've got to take some joy in what you're doing and actually find something within the conversations that you're having that just excite you or get you motivated to get up and do this every week or every month or however long you're deciding to do it for.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm going rogue. I'm literally traveling the country with a podcast set up studio in a suitcase and just set it up wherever I am. This takes some Sheffield. James Mobbs, sending up, by the way, Mark. He's talked about the podcast, his appearance on your podcast when we were chatting. And literally just wandered up into the street place in Sheffield, asked them up the boozy corner, one of them, Hitchens set up, did exactly as Mark said. Audio set up, cameras are set up, but it's all gone within 3 hours. It's energy. The only reason you're doing that is because you will enjoy it. Right on. Otherwise, what a drab conversation.
I sort of sought professional help when I was looking at setting up the podcast because I just wanted it to be really good. And what I did was I was lucky, a bit of great timing. I'm a real radio geek, I love radio, so reached out to one of my favourite DJs, a guy called Jeff Lloyd, and he used to be an Absolute Radio and Virgin and all that. And Jeff, and he's a massive podcaster now, and he said his producer was leaving to set up a podcast business, which now is winning awards all over the shop, BBC and all these great things. So I got him for £35 an hour at the time. And what we did was we front loaded some costs to basically create the program. And then from there, he would then do my editing for the first little while when it all kind of costed in. So basically what he taught me was structure. And we talked about my favourite podcasts, my favourite broadcasters, all these things. And then we just sort of pulled all that together. And one of my favourite ones is Adam Buxton, the sort of comedy podcast or comedy interviewing podcast. So we sort of roughly based it on that in terms of structure. So he said, right, what you're going to do is a spoken intro when you're walking along Brighton Beach or you're out and about or telling people where you are and you're just saying what's happening. Then from there, there'll be like a theme tune that is, gets to be recognisable eventually. We'll put some work into that. So basically I wrote out to a bunch of friends and said, could you just say Supersonic in any way that you like? So a bunch of people then come back with all these, kids saying it and stupid voices and all the rest of it. So we put all that together, and we didn't invest a lot of money in the music, but it was like an indie guitar riff that actually came up when I wrote Supersonic Guitar into, I think it was Pond 5 or whatever you call it. And then it had accompanying stings. So then we knew, and then the best shows as well have like little stings. So, you do your bit and then there's a sting and, sort of do all that. And then we knew that we didn't want to tire the audience out with too many adverts. So we structured those. We figured out how to do adverts, and a lot of people wanted me to read it, which I'd rather someone else did it to break it up, but they kind of want you. And then it's not quite a catchphrase, but a familiar thing happens now in the episodes where I'll say, so it gives me the most, and then I insert some sort of relevant word, pleasure ever to, introduce blah, blah, blah. So that sort of stuck. Someone pointed it out. I think it was Charlie McVeigh or Mark Stretton that pointed it out that I said it every time. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, right, that might be a thing. So I've not quite got to, what's up or whatever the catchphrase is. I've not quite got to that yet. But yeah, I think investing in your structure, but go as niche as you like, but I would say also give yourself some room to grow, because the podcast will change over time. My original idea was going to be about hospitality marketing, really. And it's not really worked out that way. I'm talking to CEOs and senior people in hospitality that people want to hear from. And then I've managed to take the odd schleb on as well. So it's sort of widened out. So it's a bit of a duality thing, but make it niche, but also don't box yourself in.
That's a really good point about, Tim mentioned earlier about niche podcasts being the ones that are generally the ones that do best because they reach a very sort of targeted audience. But it's interesting for me to consider that when I think about your podcast, Michael, because for me, the only niche there I think is hospitality, but the sort of topics that your guests cover are extremely broad.
Yeah, and that was a bit like fact. I have to take.
Here he goes with the books.
I love books. Oh. But actually, it comes from.
You were writing.
I got this book from my favorite professor at university when I was writing my dissertation. At the same time, implementing good to great in a business, and I learned there's some businesses that goes through whatever comes, pandemics, inflation, whatever comes, they win. And I thought, this is super interesting. And that was like my egoistic reason to start the podcast in a way, talk with industry leaders, because I love food and hospitality. I want to find the businesses that does that in hospitality. And that what I found out is not just about businesses, as you said. There's also humans that reinvent themselves and just like go through challenges. And I call them the Mavericks. So it's both individuals, it's suppliers, it's organizations that actually have this Maverick behavior. And that's really what I'm looking for. I want to share. So it's about like, how can you actually make the industry better by getting some hacks in principle to make yourself better? But actually, it came out of not me thinking all that. It's a bit like Mark said, evolved over time. I had a clear strategy and I wanted to find organizations that's doing that. Let's think about Dishoom, think about these kind of companies that does these unique things. And then it just evolved as I was developing the show on the go. But actually, as Mark said, I actually went in as well from the outset. It's because one of my customers was saying, oh, I would love to be a fly on the wall when you're talking with CEOs about their organizational challenges. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Can you write blogs about that? I'm never going to sit down and write a blog. I don't have the time for that. And then I had a write a book that led to me, the marketing genius said, do a podcast. I said, well, how do I do that? And I said, just do what Tim Ferriss does. Sit down and chat with people, Michael. Ask them all these interesting questions you have there, 100 questions to CEO. And that was actually how it started, and that was the why. And then for me, it became like my personal MBA. And now I think it has just become that thing of how can you actually help organization, peoples, and teams to become better in the hospitality industry? Because if we become better as an industry, more profitable, we will also make the world a better place, because hospitality is the unique skill that make this industry different, but also what we need in this world that's suffering. So it's really about like my own egoistical purpose, but also there was actually an audience, that my key core audience that still are listening, 1,000 super fans, wanted to hear what other CEOs, HR directors were doing to build great organizations. So that was actually why I started.
I think also Michael raises a great point. I mean, he always raises great points, but the one that I picked up from there was around the Tim Ferriss analogy. I think you don't have to reinvent the wheel with this in terms of coming up with a new way of doing things. Ultimately, a podcast really can only be a conversation, right? Whether that's a one person, two microphone conversation, or a one person to someone else or some other people. There's not a lot else you can do with it other than that. So, look at the people who are successful, Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, Stephen Bartlett, all of these kind of regular people, and just ask yourself, why are they successful? And I think half the time it actually comes down to your ability to ask good questions, and get them talking, which is ironically, I'm talking now, aren't I? So, but I think it was a key point for me, is that to understand, and I suppose maybe this is where my recruitment background also helped, is because I'm used to asking people questions and getting them to open up about themselves. But when you relax them down, that's when you get the gold, the really, really good stuff.
I think you need to be brave with questions as well. Sorry, Sarah. Be brave with your questions. I was chatting with somebody last week, and a window of opportunity opened up to dig into their family, and they opened it up slightly, and I saw the opportunity to kind of just climb through it and took it. And there was a moment where they were slightly uncomfortable, but they still spoke, and they spoke freely and generously of this family experience. That if you're not looking for those opportunities and don't take the risk of people, well, they could just say to me, actually, don't right. But actually, more often than not, people, if you've done the job properly, we've relaxed them and got to a comfortable space, they will just actually upskill you the information. And that becomes hugely impactful. But you start to have a really genuine conversation.
That's interesting that you said that. I'm glad that you kind of link those two things together, because you're talking about obviously questions and making people feel comfortable. Michelle, on your podcast, people are tackling very, very difficult subjects. And, like you said yourself, there's no script. You just want people to have their moment to talk. So the question thing doesn't really come into it. But it is the comfort part and making sure they're comfortable to speak and just to open up. So do you purposely create an environment for that?
Yes. I always tell people before we start recording, everything that they say, it belongs to them, and they've got complete control over it. And if at any point they don't feel happy about something, just flag it. We'll edit it out. I can send the edit to them, all of that kind of thing. And until they've kind of signed it off, it belongs to them. And no one's ever taken me up on it. And I think because of the nature of the style of podcast anyway, and what we're talking about, people who have recovered from addiction, anything really, we bloody love to talk about it, because when you survive something, and anyone can relate to this, then it's something that it's really, really a powerful, your story is something that you share with such excitement and exuberance that luckily there's not really been too much challenge in getting people to kind of go there. I've had a few of those moments, which I call my Stephen Bartlett moments, where they go, I've never told anyone else this before, and I just make sure to keep my face very but inside I'm like, fuck yeah! Which is great. That's like what we want. So you just have to do So I think, like I say, luckily the nature of my podcast is that the people coming on there are specifically coming on because they want to share their story, because they know how much their stories can help other people's. But I just want to quickly touch on the idea of pivoting and stuff like that, and evolving. So my podcast for 2 seasons now has focused on hospitality conversations. And very quickly I realized that I didn't just want to talk to people about addiction. And over the 2 seasons, I've talked to people about all sorts of hospitality stuff, toxic workplaces. And I've spoken to organizations and mentors and lots of other things. And when the podcast came out, the advice was to be very niche. And this was like 18 months ago. And The advice these days, however, is to be a little bit broader, because what's happened is that everyone's niche, and now we've got loads of niche podcasts. And so I did initially think, well, I've got to just throw it all away and start again, because I don't know if I want to only talk about these things. And luckily, I've got some really wonderful friends who have said to me, you can evolve and you can pivot and you can change. And I think that's, again, something that's really important to realize when you're podcasting, that it's all right that if you get to a point with your subject matter. And for me, my subject matter was completely cathartic. I'm neurodivergent, and one of the things that neurodivergent people have is an intense sense of social injustice. And I could not sit and be quiet and allow what happened to me in the industry to not be spoken about. That was my big drive. But I'm kind of over it now, kind of healed. I don't know if I still want to talk about that. But what happens in the beauty of the podcast is that I've realized that recovery covers so many things. We all recover from something. If it's an eating disorder, a toxic relationship, it's ourselves, it's body image, it's perimenopause, I've got a chronic illness. There's so much incredible stories of of recovery. And that's not also limited to hospitality. So in season 3, I've now got the honor of being able to talk to all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life. And I just think it's really important as well that it's all right that if you evolve, that evolution is not a negative, even if it is shit scary. So please still listen.
I think there's 2 points to this, right? Because
go back to talking to bloody hospital people.
I think there's 2 points to this, because you evolve as well. Like Mark said earlier on, so your first episodes are going to be a bit shit, right? Because you're learning the process, you are going through a journey. But the other thing is with podcasts, they have what they call a long tail in marketing. So you got 5 years, 5 years from now, somebody might pick up one of your episodes now, and they're at the start of this journey. So while you might have moved on and stuff, that podcast will still be there, and still, so long as it, depending on the subject, it will still be relevant for people, and people can still learn from it. I mean, it was early this year, I had an email it was on LinkedIn. Somebody contacted me about the episode that we did with a trans person on, and they were talking about trans rights. And this person literally said that they just listened to it. We think that about 2 years ago, and they considered themselves completely re-educated on the matter. And it was such an honor to have somebody listen to a little 20-minute episode that we did with a guest, but has absolutely transformed their opinion on trans rights. And I think that's the magic of a podcast, because it's there forever. And like you said, why we might have evolved, there are people at different stages throughout that entire journey. And that's why it's important to share these stories with other people.
So beautiful. And even just then, like what you said, I think your why are you doing it? And if you're doing it because you want 10,000 downloads an episode and you want to make money and all of that stuff, then cool, crack on. Probably easier ways to make money. Can't all be, Mark. But if your why is that moment right there, you've made an impact on one person's life by doing that one episode. If that's your why, then this is the best value thing you will ever do with your life. So again, I think it's just about making sure you understand that the payoff might look different to the way you thought it would, but that doesn't mean that it's not really worthwhile.
And don't forget, you can have more than one podcast.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, a lot of people are like, oh my God, I've got to have, and yeah, there's loads that would be double the work, and actually might not be double the work. There might be economies of scale across it. But that's the other thing, thinking about Shell's stuff, maybe there is that core of recovery and all the rest of it. Maybe there's something else about relationships or, finding your why or something about butterfly, who knows? So, because I had 2 running for a while, or not that long, but during COVID. So I had a 90s music one, which is my real sort of passion, just music in general. And it gave me the license to talk to my heroes from when I was a kid. So it was just such a buzz, just having all my favourite, or as many favourites that said yes, people from the 90s, and it was just a fanboy moment. That was all, you know, and you know, and that did okay. So again, don't feel that then this one vehicle has then got to do everything ever. You know, you can then try like bonus series, sub-series. Maybe you have a special within the podcast that's focusing on something else, or there's a whole bunch of ways to play it. But look at what other podcasters do. You know, Richard Herring's very good at it. You know, he has got a book club as well as doing live stuff, as well as doing, and he's just shamelessly just chucking them in, and absolutely take a leaf out the Goal Hanger book as well. I mean, they're the gods of podcasting at the moment. I mean, they're number one in every chart, and the way they monetize it, and so clever. So you can take a lot of inspiration as well out there.
What was that called, Mark? That one?
Goal Hanger?
Aye, I've not heard of
that. So it's Gary Lineker's production.
It's Scottish, and I immediately start going, aye.
Oh, yeah. It's Gary Lineker's production house. So the rest is entertainment, the rest is politics, the rest is history, the rest is football. Absolute masterclass.
I was going to say the thing that keeps coming up is evolution of your podcast. And I think one of the things Timothy will agree to is obviously he started the podcast with Sarah during lockdown, wanted to celebrate the goodness in the industry and all the good things that people were doing. And there came a point, particularly after I came on board, that we realised when we were kind of like reviewing everything that it was all a bit too good, if that makes sense. Like all the questions were good to get good answers, and it was very fluffy, and we didn't feel really laugh. And we kind of thought, actually, if we want our listeners to learn and take something away from this, it needs to be more lifelike. It needs to be more honest. And we kind of started changing the questions and how we kind of approach people and who we were talking to in the industry as well. So it wasn't always the top flyers. It was the people who are hospitality, if that makes sense, what makes it the industry that it is. And I think that's what's really changed the dynamic of talking hospitality, and the fact that, like Mark just said, you know, doing specials, having multiple guests, all those sorts of things has really kind of made a different voice for us on the podcast, but in a good way, because people want to hear the dirty stuff as well. Let's face it. It's not about the happy fluffy all the time. And so I'm really glad we had the opportunity to evolve that part as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, because when Sarah and I started it, I was working for government funded business, so I had to be very careful what we were saying, and that was for 2 seasons, and that did impact on what we want to say, because anybody that knows Sarah or gets to know her will know she's very feisty and not backwards in coming forwards, and we had to restrain and edit. We weren't allowed to say anything about Boris, because Boris was putting money into the company I was working for. So it did make a difference, and it does make it, and because like life changes, we're more liberal to do that, and we're able to get people to talk about dirty stuff, and now we're not afraid to have the odd swear word in.
Conflict of interest is a big thing, isn't it? Because I think it's, you know, I guess, and this kind of comes to something we were going to touch on anyway. It was like, you know, you have to be quite brave to put your voice out there. Like, even if you've got, you know, if you're a teenager with a social media account now, someone's going to find it, and somebody might, you know, post some abuse about something that you've posted, which is kind of terrifying when you think about the world we live in, where everyone has access to you. Now, if you decide to put a podcast out there, you're amplifying that even more, quite literally. And you're saying, listen to me, judge what I'm saying, which is what people will do. It's quite hard, I think, to sometimes look back and go, oh gosh, should I have said that? Like, have any of you had moments where you've gone, I feel a little bit funny about that, I don't know where this is going to go?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I had friends telling me not to do it because of the subject matter and because I was really putting myself out there. And, you know, let's be clear, I was not a great manager a lot of the time. I don't know, that's not fair. I was a really good manager, but there are things that I did that I'm not proud of. And I only did the things that I did because that's what I saw others do. You know, there were times that I was a very toxic manager where I did the whole Gordon Ramsay, you know, screaming and then the coddling after and all of this. And there I am now on a and I used alcohol constantly with my team to motivate them. Shots after work, stay after work, drink with me, you know. And so I was really conscious that to have somebody who potentially had a very negative, toxic influence on somebody to sit there in recovery and be like, here I am, recovered, with my podcast, that. But I've probably caused a lot of harm to a lot of people because of my behavior. That was really challenging. But luckily, so far, did have a few messages that were challenging, and I had to just go through that as part of my healing process of being able to say, yes, you're right. I didn't behave in the way that I'm proud of. I didn't know then what I know now. I am sorry. And I've been able to at least heal some of those wounds for people. And then in the ones for people who don't reach out, I just make sure that I'm very, very honest within the podcast, and that you can hear across the episodes that I do learn and I do change. And I have got that ability to, to have humility and stuff like that. But you're very, very right. When we do podcasts, I think even regardless of what the subject matter is, you are opening yourself up for people from your past to come back and say, well, hang on a second, you've changed your tune and da-da-da-da. I think it's then just about the way that you deal with it afterwards. But it was a real concern. And it could still be one.
So, this is where vulnerability is really key, and being comfortable with vulnerability and kind of recognizing what you've done wrong throughout your career. Because not a single person on the screen right now has been the best leader that they would have ever wanted to be at every given point. Now, I class myself as being a man who understands leadership, but I also know there have been times and there are people who have just walked away with memories of peace, but great. So remembering being real with us and being honest with these is a really key part of the conversation, and just not sitting there presenting yourself as being this, I'm godlike, I have passed in every single step possible moving forward, I'm as good as it gets, always happening, always will be. That doesn't work. I remember back to when I first started out doing LinkedIn content videos. I remember one guy who used to work for me just trolled the crap out of it on time for about 2 months because he ended up getting fired, and he took it really badly. He was fired because he stole from in the tip of the team. But he spoke on social. He didn't talk about why he was fired. He talked about I was a terrible person who let him go. And I was not the leader that I was telling them all what I was. We can get into this at one, but I don't think you do it. But recognizing when you fall them short, most people fall short. It's just a fact. And Monica's been 25 years of operations. I just count how many people who've got careers been in my house. I've been amazing. I've been so well done all the time. I'm not a senior advance. So being confident to just accept that in one lock. Also, there's a conversation. It's not shed like we're just us, which can sort of demonstrate vulnerability with other people with less technique. That's fair.
That's really interesting you said about vulnerability, actually, Kieron, because one of the things that I wanted to touch on, I think it's something you mentioned before as well about, having imposter syndrome and thinking sort of, why am I worthy of this? A lot of people go through that stage when they're thinking about setting up a podcast, where the question really inside you is, why would anyone want to listen to me? Now, I had a chat actually last night on the phone. Timothy and I were talking about this. And Tim, I don't know do you remember what you said to me about that last night? Well, Tim's actually frozen, so I'm going to tell you what he said. He said, I very quickly stopped giving a shit. So it's kind of the perfect answer. But I actually wanted to ask, did anyone else, did you all go through that? Did everyone have that, oh God, why do they want to listen to me? Why would anyone care what I have to say? And if you did go through that, how did you get over it?
I didn't have that so much. Why would they want to listen to me? Because of course they would. I mean, come on. But for me, it was some of the topics that we were talking about on the podcast, knowing some of the people that I have in my life, was the fact that I'm kind of associated with these topics, and how would they feel that I'm talking about it, and delving further into it and knowing that it's not how they feel about it. That for me was do I want to share this podcast with them? Do I want to tell them that I'm part of it, even though I have there's no shame or embarrassment from my side, but what would they then think of me because I was a part of it? So that was something that I had to get over. And I got to a point where I thought, I don't give a shit. I love what I'm doing, and it's interesting, it's fun, it's educational, and it's supporting and helping people. So actually, if that's your opinion, and let's use the phrase ignorance, then so be it. But we just have to keep going on, because someone needs to know what we're talking about. Even if it's one person, then that's enough for me.
I think there's two things in play for me. One, it just came down to the fact, would I like to listen to my show? I don't mean specifically listening to my own voice about stuff, but would I take an interest in the content that's going to be provided in here? And if the answer to that was yes, then you're on to something as a starting point. I think Kieron's point on vulnerability is massive. Always, 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 when I look back around my life, really, really, what's held me back has been me, because I've really, really suffered with that allodoxophobia, the fear of other people's opinions. And one day when you wake up and you realise that that's not serving you, is the day that you realise, well, maybe there's a podcast voice in there, or there's a voice in there of some description that wants to say something meaningful that if I would like this, then maybe other people would like it too. But I think getting past your own vulnerability is massively important to get to that point.
I think you're totally right, Phil, and I had that too. You know, I've got a list of people, I think, that I've not gelled with over the years or whatever, and it was those people I thought, well, they'll be laughing at me doing this. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're sort of putting yourself out there, and what will they think? And then I think, I was a huge fan of Gary Vaynerchuk in the early days, and, still a lot of what he says is good, but he really was like, look, you're stopping yourself from growing, you're stopping yourself potentially from putting food on the table, you're stopping yourself from being yourself. So once you get over that, then I think that's okay. And the other thing I was going to say is, we're all in business, right? Like, it's actually not a bad biz dev tool, and it was never ever set up for that ever, right? But you'll meet someone new that you've never met. You can't really hold a mask up for 1 hour, 2 hours. Well, you can, but it would be pretty exhausting. So they get to hang out with you, and, usually are trying to be quite a genial host and making them feel comfortable, and they realise that you maybe know some stuff and things like that. So actually, after some podcast episodes, you might get a little lead out of it, or you might get a recommendation, or you might get introduced to someone, and it's never about that. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not this huge master plan to be a Trojan horse. I'm not clever enough for that. But at the same time, that's worked out as well, and just, it's the thing that Rory Sutherland talks about, which is increasing your surface area. So with every listen, with every episode, with every post on LinkedIn and Instagram and all the rest of it, you're just, again, one person sees it. They might not contact you for a year and a half, but you're getting it out there. And obviously there's the ego thing, which is when your episode is live and drops, you're pretty proud, I think, most weeks that it's went out. And it's lovely to get messages back going, I really enjoyed that, or I've listened to that 13 times, or whatever it was. It's a lovely thing. So yeah, I think it's just go for it. And what you can do is launch it and go and hide in your bed for a couple of days and, just see what the reaction is. You can always take it down if it's that bad. The last point I was going to make, because I know maybe time and all that, was that none of us are going to make front page of the Sun, right? So you can overthink this in terms of going, oh my God, and over editing and every and and and, all these things, or, oh God, I said that, or, yeah, there you go. Michael's mug says, what does it say? We suffer what?
We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Yeah. So exactly from that point of view, it's just like, look, don't, I think it's Nando's always talk about, at the end of the day, we only serve chicken and chips. Don't sort of over worry about it. And it's the same thing with podcasting. Like, if you're lucky, you're going to get a couple of hundred listeners, and, no one's going to sort of drop their bacon sandwich that you've said something out of turn or something, so don't stress about that.
I mean, if no one's listening to it, no one's going to notice when you stop doing it, are they? So,
well, you are. You will. Yeah.
Was it
good point.
I don't forget the not giving a shit. The thing about not giving a shit, that kind of, anybody who knows me has spent time at the outside, fundamentally I'm unapologetic kind of me and by now. And I used to think of that mindset. It's not that I don't think it's shit. It's not that at all. I do think it. It's just their opinion isn't defined by what I assume. It's next thing. So when I get comfortable with that, then update. It's okay to understand, to be conscious of what people are thinking, they say, but that's what we find a difference in.
I think one of the best things I did was I did a YouTube. That's terrible. I did a YouTube channel during lockdown. It was awful. But what happened is I learned how to not care about what I was projecting so much. And then that gave me a freedom in terms of being able to speak more and just not worrying about what other people did. I mean, basically, one of them was me doing exercises really badly, even with like ridiculous things with me farting when I'm doing squats. Just that kind of level, low brow. But it's still out there.
My kind of...
Yeah. Maybe I need to think about it now that I'm a professional. But I might need to... but that got me over it, because what's the worst that can happen? Literally.
Yeah, and don't forget the words of one of the greatest philosophers of all time, which is that the haters are going to hate, right? So it's true. Like, just get over the fact that you might get some backlash, but don't let that be the thing that stops you doing the thing that gives you joy and passion and fun and all of that kind of stuff. And I have actually, I think I said this and we had a chat the other day, gents, around, I've been trolled before. It's the greatest troll in the existence. Cheers, Kieron. In the existence of all trolls, which was quite simply, stop being so bloody positive. That was what and I was like, let's keep that standard up, guys. Yeah, let's have more of that. If that's the best you got, then I'm game. I'm ready to be trolled.
Yeah, you're good. If that's all they can throw at you, Phil, you're good.
Yeah.
Also,
Absolutely.
if they're listening to you to troll you, they're just adding to your numbers.
Yes.
Thank them very much. And
Yeah.
have a good day, folks.
Thanks for listening.
It's just going to take me a step closer to a sponsor.
You're doing this because you want to find your best self. I think a lot of podcasting is about how do I actually become the best version of myself? And there's so much in that as well that gives back to you doing a podcast. And I think Mark said that it was great business development tool, but also you meet people, you get perspectives of life that you would never had. Like, and that really what grows you, like in these conversations. There's the interview and there's the conversations you have off the mic.
Yeah.
It's just so valuable sometimes. And the meetups you have with people after you had them on the show, where you build a relationship with these people and they help you on your journey. And I think that's probably, you can have sponsors, you can get business opportunity, but that way you're growing yourself and become the better version of yourself. That's really where I think there is some, and then you come, you have your procrastination all the time. We all suffer from imposter syndrome. It's just about question about how do we manage it. But I really think it's like, if you want to become a better version of yourself, like I would say the podcast really definitely for me, and I don't know if others here feel that, but I definitely feel that's really pushed me in a better direction over the last 6 to 8 years.
Completely
You
agree.
talk about some of the weirdness as well, because I think there's some weirdness attached to it. I think that moment when somebody walks up to you and sees you, kind of shakes your hand and starts to chat to you like they're your best friend, and they know loads about you, and you're like, I don't think I've ever met you. I did that to Mark. Like, Mark and I met on Twitter, then LinkedIn, then on the podcast. And by the time we're done, like, I saw him at an event and I was like, hey, give him a big hug. And he was like, why are you hugging me? I'm like, hey, it's because we're best friends. He's like, okay. Yeah, all right. It's a strange.
It is, yeah.
But kind of, I went into a restaurant last week and the host on the restaurant kind of greeted me like, well, there's he makes. I'm looking at you. I remember most people at most points didn't have a clue who this guy was. And like, I just find intent, just I've seen it, I've just seen your face, and like that sticks out, the bright yellow hat, that just covers it out. And that qualities, think about what you do, like kind of making yourself reasonable and kind of noticeable. But it's a strange feeling. Has anybody else ever had that feeling, or is it just me being?
No, it's like,
Totally.
No, I like to think it's because I look like Britney Spears, but
I mean, throw a hand mic.
well, perhaps Tracy could talk a bit about it, because like when we rebranded it to Talking Hospitality, we got suddenly invited to all sorts of things. And I think it's partly because, if I may be so bold, if we look, majority of us here are white middle-aged men on here, and we've, my new podcast host isn't. And that was a good thing to have, because actually it opened doors for us that we didn't have before. Tracy, do you want to speak about that? Maybe it's more your experience.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's funny you say imposter syndrome, because I remember saying to Timothy at the beginning, like, I don't know why you've asked me to be a host. Like, I don't get it. I've got my background, but what am I bringing to the podcast? He's like, well, you're just bringing yourself. just be yourself. And so when I was thinking about guests and who we could have on and who we could speak to, who I was drawing on from my kind of background and my professional background was obviously very different from Timothy's. So suddenly we were looking at, I'd done some catering for a company, the Caribbean Food Collective. And I was like, oh, I know someone we can speak to. Before we knew it, we were being invited to their very first award show. They wanted us to present one of the awards. I won an award, but it was like, that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't part of the group and part of the hosts. And it's just bringing that I hate that word diversity, but it has to be out there. It is there. We are all different in very different ways, but it just brought a different side to what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve. And also our listening base as well is different because of that. And we didn't do it deliberately. Tim didn't just say, what black friend do I have? Who can I bring onto the show? It was organic. Sarah started laughing. It was organic. It was natural. It was just how it ended up being. But it has changed us for the better. And I can only imagine the same moving forwards as well.
Tracy, do you bring cake to in-person recordings?
I haven't yet. Because
I mean, if you're not,
I'm still hospitality. I'm not Essence of Caitlin, so it's different, sorry.
But cake is just that version of hospitality, right?
Yeah. I had a cracking one when I first started out. I had an old podcast called Spectacular, just because that was the company I was with at the time, and I changed the name, but not really the format. And anyway, I was out with my business partners in a pub next to the office in London, and we were literally, in the true sense of the word, having this conversation where they were going, I don't get the podcast, absolute waste of time, and I was like explaining to them this and that and that. And anyway, this guy came over and he goes, this was early, and he goes, are you Mark McCulloch? You got a podcast? And I was like, yeah. And his name was David Lightfoot. We ended up kind of being mates on LinkedIn and all that. And I was like, right, I'll buy you a pint, sit down and talk to them about why it's good having a podcast. I'd never met the guy before ever, just recognised the voice. And then that was it. And I was just like, oh my God, this is brilliant. So yeah, sat them down and it was just, he was from another agency, and then we kind of got talking to them. There's a couple of leads come out, all these things, but it was the funniest. It was like, man, I'm on the Truman Show or something. Like, this is mad that this has happened. But yeah, I was very, very pleased. That was pretty cool.
I think it really touches on what you guys have just shared about really, really investing or investigating what your why is. So what was my why for starting my podcast? And like you just said, the things that I've gotten out of it weren't necessarily the things I went into it for. So I've been asked to speak on panels, which has been incredible. It certainly wasn't the only reason I went to New Orleans, but when I went to New Orleans to speak at Tales of the Cocktail this year, having that podcast and that behind me was massive. I've spoken to some of my heroes, and this next season, I'm so excited with the guests I've got, because I've basically just asked a load of people that I fangirl over on Instagram and that I've seen in the media and stuff like that. And, whether or not there'll be relevant conversations is by the by. But I've got friends now that I've only made these friends because of the podcast. So if you'd said right at the beginning, you won't make any money, Shell, but you'll make some friends. Yeah, maybe I'd have been like, oh, that sounds a bit shit. However, I'm just so grateful for that kind of element of what the podcast has brought for me. And again, like what somebody said as well, you do develop as a person by doing this, because you put yourself in a situation where you are open and vulnerable and open for feedback and criticism. It's not really something that a lot of us like to do. Let's be clear. This is we don't go out of our way to ask people to, feedback and put ourselves out in such a public forum. So yeah, I think for me, just remembering that why, but the gifts that I've had from the podcast have been surprising and continue to surprise. And I'm really hopeful. And then that's another great thing about the podcast, I think, as well, is that once you realize that the things that you can gain from it are actually quite limitless, that's the excitement as well. I don't know where this next season's going to take me. It might take me nowhere. it might take me everywhere. You know, it might be the thing that helps me get my book started. I think someone's written a book actually in this group. It might be the thing that gets me on the BBC. It might be the thing that, you know, maybe I'll find the one. Who knows? But if the worst thing that happens is that I get to talk to 15 incredible human beings about the powerful things that they've been through and make 15 friends, well, it's not a bad day's work, is it, really?
Yeah.
You know?
It's that joy, isn't it? I can hear that joy in your voice, Shell. And I mean, Sarah and Timothy know I fangirl constantly is terrible. But I remember Timothy calling me after he'd met one of his heroes. I won't name names, but he was just like, I can't believe their numbers in my phone. It's like, it's just...
Was it Mark?
Close. It was close. I was quite wrecked actually when I got Mark to say yes, I have to say.
I'm so excited to be honest.
It's like, I'd follow this person, I've seen them on TV and blah, blah, and he was just like, I can't believe there's a connection there now. And, you know, he didn't do this for that, but just having these things and, like I say, these gifts that come from it, there's nothing else like it, really. It's fabulous. I love it.
That's so true.
A question I had was, a very quick question was, does anyone else get anxious before doing it? I always get really anxious before an episode.
100%.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah,
don't you?
I think that's another thing to say to people.
No.
It's kind of like, I have that sort of feeling when I did driving lessons, like when the driving instructor was coming, I was like, I don't want to do it. And then once I did it, I always felt better after it. But it's interesting. I seem to go through this kind of creative thing, which is, this is going to be great. Oh my God, this is going to be this is going to be great. I'm already, oh my God. And then once you're in, you're so in the zone and happy and calm and, you know, but just that little 15, 20 minutes before, I'm a little bit like a cat in a hot tin roof sort of thing. You know,
Like,
nervous
say,
still.
like, if you are able, just to be really honest about that. And I've actually rescheduled sessions if I've not felt, because it's not fair on that other person.
No.
And, you know, look, we all deal with quite, you know, mental health. We all have a lot of stuff. And I think it's much better there is a line between putting on the game face and getting it done. And I say the same to my guests. And I've also had a guest come on and I can see they're not quite there. And I've said to them, look, should we do this another day? It's not life and death. I can literally I can change my scheduling. It really doesn't matter. And again, to have that honesty, to be able to just say, because it is difficult, like you say, Mark, and sometimes you just don't feel like you just can't. It's really, and you owe it to yourself, I think, and to your guests to have that honesty to say. But also sometimes you do just need that shove off the cliff, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean,
it takes a lot of energy. Takes a lot of energy, and also
Yes.
now
It's
being,
I'm exhausted afterwards.
yeah.
Like,
I know.
I think that's important for everyone to know that. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We do need to wrap up. So I'm going to pass over to Phil for a closing message from us.
Are you? Okay. Sure.
That's great.
So yes, it is here. Closing. I just wanted to, I suppose, wrap up really by, first of all, thank you to you guys for one, putting this show together, two, for making it to 50, and I guess trusting us as your guest list for that 50th episode. It is no mean feat to get to 50 at all. It's a very special occasion, and you should absolutely celebrate that for sure. I think maybe as a way to round it up on a very, very quick round the table, your one best piece of advice to anybody who is considering starting a podcast, and I'll just go, Michael.
Fall in love asking great questions. Fall in love with that process. Then it's going to be much easier to be a good host.
Beautiful. Mark?
Just do it.
Very good. You can come again. Kieron?
It says it on the cap. Just be bold. Be bold AF. Just crack on. You know, just say yes to everything. Good as you can do. Take some risks. Ask your fans, the people you're fans of, can I go in? We want to be a part of it. Most of you say yes. One of them.
Very good. And I assume the AF stands for alcohol free, right?
Yes. Yeah, not going Didn't tell me not to swear. I'm just.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Remember your why. yeah, just keep reevaluating your why. Bring yourself back to it when you have dark days, when you question yourself, when you wonder if it's all worth it. Just really, really re-examine your why and be prepared to be flexible on that. And, you know, understand that change and evolution is not always a negative. You know, it's a great thing.
Yeah, I'm going to chip in before I give closing remarks to our three people who are involved with the show. And this is a piece of advice that was given to me. It's not my own. Another Mark, actually, that gave me this. Worry about perfect later. Just get on with it and get it launched, and then worry about the perfect later. There is a second piece of advice. I'm just going to be cheeky. Turn up consistently. And those two things, I don't want you to go too far away. Sarah, because you've done your fair share of podcasts as well.
I have. Yeah, I have. My advice is just don't be afraid to do bad work. Everything starts bad. Just do bad work. It always gets better.
Love it. Tracy?
Mine is definitely be yourself. Just be yourself and it will all work out at the end.
Very good. And I'm sure we've nicked them all, Tim, but on your mark.
Every time someone's going, it's like, oh, damn, they got that one. Damn, they got that one. Mine is have fun. Have fun doing it.
Great stuff. Well, I think, yeah, on you go.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming to celebrate our 50th birthday, whatever you call it, 50th episode. Thank you all very much for your time. Phil, Sarah, thank you very much for hosting today. Michael, great to have you on as guest first time. Great to see you all again, our previous guests too, and thank you for taking so much time out in your day. I really appreciate it.
A huge thank you to our brand partners Graphic Kitchen and Leisure Jobs for their continued support of Talking Hospitality. Graphic Kitchen bring creative storytelling to life, helping hospitality brands stand out in a crowded market. Leisure Jobs connects top talent with best opportunities in the industry, making it the go-to platform for hospitality careers. We're proud to have them both on board.